How a poor maid, kicked out of her home, met a billionaire who changed her life. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Imagine being thrown out of the only place you've ever called home, with nothing but the clothes on your back and no one to turn to. That was Olivia's reality. An orphan with no family, her only solace was working as a maid in a small, run-down laundry shop. The shop, although humble, was her home. She worked tirelessly, doing everything from washing clothes to ironing them. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all she had. One morning, everything changed. A wealthy woman in a bright yellow dress entered the shop, carrying a pile of expensive laundry. Olivia, trying her best to be polite, accidentally spilled a glass of water on the woman's dress. The woman exploded in anger, calling Olivia careless and demanding that she be fired. Despite Olivia's pleas, her boss, afraid of losing a lucrative customer, had no choice but to fire her. "Pack your things," he said. Olivia was thrown out onto the streets, with no place to go, no money, and no future. The woman in yellow smirked as she left, leaving Olivia broken and alone. This moment, though devastating, marked the beginning of Olivia's journey. Little did she know, this was not the end of her struggles, but the start of a life-changing adventure that would alter her destiny forever. Olivia wandered the streets, her heart pounding with panic. The weight of the world seemed to crush down on her shoulders, each step she took feeling heavier than the last. Her mind raced with questions. Where will I go? What will I do now? She had no money, no family, no one to help her. The laundry shop was the only life she had ever known, and now it was gone. The sun was setting as she stumbled through the quiet streets, feeling more invisible than ever before. People rushed past her, not even sparing a second glance. She was just another face in the crowd, another forgotten soul. She found herself at the outskirts of town, where construction workers were busy building a new building. The sound of hammers and drills filled the air, but the sight of the workers made her pause. She had nothing left. The streets were cold and unforgiving, and she couldn't bear the thought of spending another night in the dark, with nothing to protect her. Without thinking, Olivia approached the group of men, her voice shaking as she asked, Can I work here? Please, I'll do anything. I need a job." The men glanced at each other, bewildered. It wasn't every day they saw a young woman asking to work on a construction site. "This isn't a place for women," one of them said dismissively. "You can't handle the work here. It's too hard." Olivia's heart sank, but she refused to back down. She had nowhere else to turn. "Please," she said, her voice firm. "I'm strong. I can do this. Just give me a chance." The men exchanged uncertain looks, clearly unsure of what to do with her. It was obvious she had no experience in construction, but there was something in her eyes, a raw determination that caught their attention. Finally, one of them, an older man with graying hair, spoke up. "You'll have to speak to the boss," he said, pointing toward a tall figure in a white shirt who was walking toward them. Olivia nodded quickly, her nerves almost getting the better of her. She had no idea who this man was, but he was her last hope. She needed this job. She needed to survive. The man, Richard, walked over, his eyes scanning Olivia from head to toe. His expression was cold, calculating. "So, you want to work here?" he asked, his deep voice making her stomach flutter. "Yes, sir," Olivia said, standing straight despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "I have no place to go. I'll do anything. Just, please, let me work." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "This isn't easy work. Are you sure you can handle it?" His tone was sharp, but there was a flicker of something else in his gaze. Olivia's hands were trembling, but she didn't flinch. "I can do it," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I need this." For a long moment, Richard studied her, his eyes unreadable. Finally, he nodded, Fine, he said, you can start tomorrow. But don't expect any handouts. You'll work as hard as anyone else here. Olivia's heart leaped. She had done it. She had convinced him. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard turned and walked away without another word, leaving Olivia standing there, staring after him. It wasn't much, but it was enough. This was her chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, Olivia returned to the construction site. The air was thick with dust and the sound of heavy machinery, and the heat was already unbearable. She was handed a hard hat and gloves, tools she had no idea how to use, but she didn't care. She was here. She had a purpose. For the first few hours, she struggled. The work was grueling, hauling bricks, mixing cement, carrying heavy loads. Her body screamed in protest, but she pushed through. She refused to let herself fall behind. With every block she lifted, with every task she completed, she proved to herself that she was stronger than she had ever believed. The workers began to notice her determination. One of the men, a burly guy with tattoos on his arms, chuckled as he watched her struggle with a heavy load. "You're crazy, you know that?" he said, grinning. "Most of the guys here can't even keep up with that load." Olivia smiled weakly but didn't slow down. "I have no choice," she thought. "I have to keep going. This is my chance." By the end of the day, her muscles ached, her hands were raw, and her clothes were drenched in sweat and dirt. But as the sun set, Richard walked past her, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of her working tirelessly. "You're still here," he remarked, his tone neutral, though a flicker of something in his eyes caught Olivia off guard. "I thought you'd quit by now." Olivia straightened up, trying to hide her exhaustion. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice firm. Richard nodded, clearly impressed despite himself. "We'll see how long you last," he muttered before turning and walking away. Olivia couldn't help but smile to herself. She had done it. She had survived her first day. As the days passed, Olivia continued to work harder than she ever had in her life. Each day was a battle, but with every passing hour, she proved more and more that she was capable. She was determined to show Richard, and herself, that she was more than just a maid. She was a fighter, and she would not give up, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the past pressing on her. Her life, her history, her fears, they all threatened to overwhelm her. She had been thrown away like garbage, but now she was working on a construction site with men who saw her as nothing more than a novelty. She wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. She was fighting for a future, for a life that didn't include the chains of her past. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a much bigger journey. Olivia's first few weeks on the construction site were nothing short of grueling. Every day she pushed herself harder, her body aching from the labor, her mind focused only on survival. The men around her started to take notice. While some still muttered behind her back, others began to offer her words of encouragement. She wasn't just keeping up anymore, she was thriving. It wasn't long before Richard noticed too. One afternoon, as Olivia was carrying a heavy load of bricks, Richard approached her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her struggle with the load. She paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow, and looked up to find him standing there. "You're doing well," Richard said, his voice surprisingly warm. "Better than I thought you would." Olivia, startled, set the bricks down. She wiped her forehead again, trying to catch her breath. "Thank you, sir." Richard looked her over, his gaze lingering for a moment before he nodded. "I've been thinking. You've worked hard, and it's clear you can handle yourself. I'm offering you a place to stay for now. You can stay at my mansion. It's not much, but it's a safe roof over your head." Olivia's heart raced. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A mansion. It was the last thing she expected from someone like Richard, the cold, calculating billionaire who ran the construction site. "Are you serious?" she asked, almost in disbelief. Richard's lips curled into a faint smile. I'm not the kind of man who offers charity, but you've earned it. Consider it a temporary arrangement until you get back on your feet. I'll even help you find something else if you'd prefer. But for now, it's the least I can do. Her mouth went dry. It wasn't charity, he said. But that didn't change the fact that it was an offer she couldn't refuse. She was overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. Gratitude, disbelief, and yes, a bit of fear. Could she really trust him? I won't be any trouble, Olivia said, her voice quiet but sincere. Thank you, sir. I won't forget this. Richard gave her a curt nod before turning away. Pack your things. I'll drive you there tonight. That night, Richard drove Olivia to his mansion, and it was nothing like she had ever imagined. The house was grand, a towering structure of marble and glass, surrounded by manicured gardens and expensive cars parked in a driveway that seemed to stretch for miles. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale, and Olivia couldn't help but feel like she was living in someone else's dream. She followed Richard inside, her eyes wide as she took in the luxurious surroundings. The floors were polished wood, the ceilings vaulted with crystal chandeliers hanging from above. The smell of expensive perfume lingered in the air, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. Richard led her to a guest room on the second floor, its walls painted in soft shades of cream and gold. A large four-poster bed sat in the center of the room, its duvet pristine and inviting. Olivia stood at the doorway, unable to believe what she was seeing. This is yours for as long as you need, Richard said, his tone cool but not unkind. Make yourself at home. Olivia nodded, still in shock. Thank you, Richard. I don't know how to repay you for this. You don't have to, he replied, his expression unreadable. Just don't waste the opportunity. As Richard left the room, Olivia stood there, her fingers brushing the edge of the bed. She had never imagined that something like this could happen to her. She was just a maid, someone who had nothing to her name. But now, she was standing in a mansion, her own room in a house that was far beyond her wildest dreams. But the world Olivia had entered wasn't as perfect as it seemed. The very next day, Olivia met Richard's fiancée, Jessica. At first, she seemed polite enough, a tall, slender woman, in her late 20s with sharp features and an air of superiority that was unmistakable. Jessica welcomed Olivia with a smile, but Olivia quickly learned that the smile was as cold as the woman's demeanor. I see you've decided to stay with Richard, Jessica said, her voice clipped and formal as she greeted Olivia at the breakfast table. I'm sure you'll find everything here to your liking. Richard has a soft spot for people who work hard. Olivia smiled nervously, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to such wealth, let alone people like Jessica. I'm just grateful for the opportunity, Olivia said quietly. Jessica nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Olivia. It was a look Olivia didn't quite understand, but she could feel the judgment behind it. The next few days were a blur. Olivia kept her distance from Jessica, sticking to her routine of helping around the house. But it wasn't long before Olivia realized something. Jessica didn't like her. She could feel it in the way the woman looked at her, in the subtle comments she made, and in the way she tried to undermine Olivia's every action. Are you sure you know how to fold those? Jessica asked one morning, eyeing the laundry Olivia had just folded. It's not exactly how Richard likes it. Olivia nodded, her voice steady. I'll do it again. Jessica smirked, but Olivia could see the disdain in her eyes. It was clear Jessica didn't want Olivia in the house, and she wasn't afraid to show it. Olivia tried to stay out of her way, but it was impossible not to feel the tension in the air. One evening, Richard invited Olivia to join him for dinner. It was the first time they had shared a meal together, just the two of them, and Olivia couldn't help but feel a mixture of nerves and excitement. She had spent so much time focused on survival that she hadn't given much thought to what came next. But here she was, sitting across from Richard in his elegant dining room, the glow of candlelight casting shadows on the walls. Olivia had just taken a bite of her food when Jessica entered the room, her eyes immediately locking onto Olivia with a look of pure contempt. "I didn't realize you two were getting so cozy," Jessica said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she took her seat at the table. Olivia didn't know what to say. She could feel Jessica's eyes burning through her, and the tension in the room was thick. Richard, sensing the discomfort, cleared his throat and spoke calmly. "Jessica, this is Olivia. She's staying here, and I expect you to respect that." Jessica's lips twisted into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, darling. I'll try to be civil. But I don't see why she's here in the first place." She glanced pointedly at Olivia. "Richard, you know I don't like surprises." Olivia's stomach tightened, but she didn't let the words get to her. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to let Jessica's venom get the best of her. "You don't have to like it," Olivia said quietly, meeting Jessica's gaze. "I'm not here to make anyone happy. I'm here to survive." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Jessica's smile faltered. Richard looked between them, his face tense. The air crackled with unspoken words, and Olivia realized something. Jessica wasn't just angry that she was there. She was threatened. What Olivia hadn't expected was that living in this mansion, surrounded by wealth and luxury, would turn into a battlefield. Jessica wasn't just irritated by her presence. She was actively trying to make Olivia's life miserable. Every day, Olivia felt the sting of Jessica's passive-aggressive comments and cold glances. And as much as Olivia wanted to leave, she knew she couldn't. Not yet. She needed to stay close to Richard, because, for reasons she couldn't quite explain, he had become her only hope. But as the days wore on, Olivia realized that surviving in this mansion was going to be more difficult than she ever imagined. This wasn't just about working hard anymore. This was about fighting for a future, one where she wasn't treated like a servant, but as a person deserving of respect. And Olivia wasn't going to let Jessica or anyone else stand in her way. Olivia had settled into a strange rhythm at the mansion. She worked hard, staying out of Jessica's way as much as possible. Every day felt like a new battle, small, subtle tests of endurance. She continued to fold the laundry with precision, cooked when asked, and cleaned the rooms, always mindful of Jessica's icy presence. Richard, though he was kind, was distant. It was clear that he cared for Olivia, but he couldn't see the tension that had been brewing right under his nose. But Olivia was no fool. She could feel the storm coming. Jessica's hostility had become harder to ignore, and Olivia knew she was walking a razor's edge. It all came to a head one evening. The air in the mansion had a certain heaviness to it. Dinner was being served, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia had been invited to join Richard and Jessica for a formal meal. She was used to eating alone, often in the kitchen or at the counter, but tonight felt different. It felt almost like a test. Olivia entered the dining room, where Richard was already seated at the head of the table. Jessica, as usual, was perched in her seat, a picture of elegance, but with an underlying air of dissatisfaction. "Olivia," Richard greeted her warmly as she sat down. "I'm glad you could join us tonight." Jessica didn't look up from her glass of wine. "Of course," she said, her tone cool. Why wouldn't she? The night went on with small talk, the clinking of silverware against porcelain, and the ever-present tension that had become a constant companion for Olivia. Every word Jessica spoke felt like a calculated jab, a silent declaration of war. But then something happened, something Olivia never expected. Halfway through the meal, Olivia felt it. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. At first, she tried to ignore it, chalking it up to exhaustion from the long days of hard work. But then, it got worse. Her vision blurred, Her hands began to shake, and she struggled to hold onto the fork in her hand. She blinked, trying to steady herself, but the room seemed to spin around her. Her stomach churned, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. The world was spinning, and she couldn't understand why. She barely heard the commotion around her, but she felt the weight of someone's gaze on her. "Olivia?" Richard's voice sliced through the haze, his concern palpable. "Are you okay?" Olivia opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she staggered, the food from her plate spilling over the table as she gripped the edge of the chair to keep herself from falling. The last thing she remembered before everything went black was Jessica's cold, knowing eyes. She felt a chill run through her spine, and it had nothing to do with the physical weakness she was experiencing. When Olivia regained consciousness, she found herself lying in a sterile white bed, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, the only sound breaking the silence. The harsh lights above her made everything feel surreal. "Olivia, you're awake." Richard's voice was a mix of relief and concern as he leaned over her, his eyes softening when he saw she was conscious. "How do you feel? Are you okay?" Her throat was dry, and she barely managed to speak. I don't know what happened." "You collapsed at dinner," Richard explained, sitting beside her. "We rushed you to the hospital. The doctors think it was some kind of poisoning, but they're not sure what it was yet." Olivia's heart raced. Poisoning? But why? Before she could ask another question, the door opened, and Jessica walked in. Her expression was unreadable, but Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "How is she?" Jessica asked, her voice eerily calm. "She's awake," Richard replied. "The doctors think she was poisoned." Jessica's eyes flicked to Olivia with a knowing glance. "Well, that's unfortunate, isn't it?" Olivia frowned, her head still foggy, but the pieces were starting to come together. She remembered the food, the way she had felt after taking a bite. She had been fine before the meal. And yet, she was the one who had collapsed. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? As the days passed, Olivia's mind began to clear, and the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The doctors had found traces of a substance in her blood, a substance that was often used to induce symptoms of poisoning, but was nearly impossible to trace in small doses. It was a sophisticated poison, one that required someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And then it hit her. Jessica. Olivia's mind raced as she pieced it together. Jessica had always been cold toward her, but this was something more. This was deliberate. The way Jessica had looked at her that night, so calm, so calculating, it all made sense now. Jessica is the poisoner. And Richard, blinded by his feelings for Jessica, couldn't see it. But Olivia couldn't just sit back and let this go. She wasn't going to let Jessica get away with this. Not when her life was on the line. That evening, when Richard was out, Olivia confronted Jessica. She found her sitting alone in the living room, sipping wine with a look of smug satisfaction on her face. "You did this," Olivia said, her voice low but unwavering. Jessica didn't even flinch. She set her glass down slowly, turning to face Olivia with a smirk. "You think I did this? How absurd. You've become quite the drama queen, haven't you?" Olivia took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. "I know what you did. You poisoned me. You framed me, tried to get rid of me." Jessica's smile didn't falter. "Oh, Olivia, you really think you can accuse me of such a thing and get away with it? You're nothing but a servant in this house, and I'll make sure Richard understands that." Olivia's chest tightened. She was scared, but she was also angry. "I will tell Richard what you've done. I won't let you get away with this." Jessica laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that sent a shiver down Olivia's spine. "Oh, go ahead. He won't believe you. You're just the maid." "He'll think you're making things up." But Olivia wasn't backing down. She had already seen the truth in Jessica's eyes. She had no proof yet, but she would find it. And once she did, nothing could stop her. The game had changed. Olivia wasn't just fighting for a roof over her head anymore. She was fighting for her life, and she wouldn't let Jessica's manipulation and cruelty destroy her. She didn't know how or when, but she was going to get the proof she needed. Richard deserved the truth, and Olivia was going to give it to him, no matter what it took. This was war. And Olivia wasn't going to lose. The days that followed Olivia's confrontation with Jessica were filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Olivia had never been a fighter. She had always taken what life threw at her, accepting her place in the world without question. But after what Jessica had done, everything changed. Olivia wasn't going to be a victim anymore. She wasn't going to let Jessica destroy her. Olivia knew she had to be careful. Jessica was a master manipulator, and she wouldn't hesitate to turn the tables if she felt cornered. Richard still hadn't fully believed that Jessica was capable of poisoning Olivia, and every time Olivia tried to tell him the truth, he seemed to doubt her, his affection for Jessica blinding him to the reality that lay right in front of him. Olivia spent her days watching Jessica closely, trying to find any clue, any piece of evidence that would prove Jessica's guilt. The mansion that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. Every time Olivia stepped foot in the kitchen, every time she handled the food, she was reminded of the poison. She felt like she was being watched, like the walls were closing in on her. It was late one evening when Olivia was tidying up the kitchen that she saw it. The small vial, hidden behind a stack of spice jars, barely visible in the dim light. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the vial immediately. It was the same substance that the doctors had found in her system, the poison that had nearly killed her. Olivia's hands trembled as she carefully pulled the vial from its hiding spot. She studied it, her mind racing. This was it, the proof she needed. Jessica had been hiding it, keeping it close, knowing that one day she might need it again. The moment Olivia held the vial in her hand, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't just keep it to herself anymore. She had to confront Jessica once and for all and show Richard the truth. But how could she do that? How could she make Richard see the woman he loved for who she really was? With the vial carefully tucked in her pocket, Olivia found Richard in his study later that night. He was sitting at his desk, his back turned to her as he looked at some papers. Olivia took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. This was it. "Richard," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Richard turned to face her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Olivia, what's wrong? Is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you," she said, walking toward him. "It's about Jessica." Richard's face hardened at the mention of her name. "What about her?" Olivia took a step closer, her hands shaking as she pulled the vial from her pocket and placed it on the desk. "This," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is what she poisoned me with. I found it in her hiding place." Richard's eyes widened as he stared at the vial. His gaze flickered back to Olivia's face, searching for some sign that this was a lie, but all he saw was the truth. "Olivia, Richard stammered, but the words didn't come. His mind raced, the weight of what she had just revealed crashing down on him. "You have to believe me, Richard," Olivia said, her voice urgent. "Jessica has been poisoning me, framing me. She tried to kill me. And you need to see it. You need to understand who she really is." Richard's face paled, his lips trembling. He looked at the vial again, then back at Olivia. But why? Why would she do something like this?" Olivia's heart ached. She knew this was hard for Richard to process, but it was the only way. "She's been manipulating you, Richard. She wants me gone. She's threatened me, made me feel small. And she's been poisoning me, trying to make you believe that I'm crazy, But I'm not. I'm not. Richard's hands shook as he reached for the vial, picking it up and holding it between his fingers as though it might shatter at any moment. His eyes were wild, filled with confusion, betrayal, and pain. I don't know what to say, he said, his voice hoarse. I never saw this. I never wanted to see this. Olivia watched him, her heart breaking for him. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the pain of realizing that the woman he loved was capable of something so vile. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Richard, I never wanted this, Olivia said softly. I never wanted to come between you and Jessica, but she forced me into a corner. I had no choice. I had to show you the truth. Richard closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. I don't know what to do. I can't believe it. She seemed so perfect. How could I not see this? Olivia squeezed his arm gently. You didn't see it because she's good at hiding the truth. But now you know. Now we can do something about it. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. Richard, the man who had once been so confident and sure of himself, now felt broken. He had trusted Jessica, loved her, but everything had changed in an instant. Finally, Richard looked at Olivia, his eyes filled with determination. I'm going to make this right, he said, his voice firm. I'll make sure she pays for what she's done. Olivia nodded, feeling a small flicker of hope in her chest. For the first time since everything had started to fall apart, she felt like she wasn't alone. Richard was finally seeing the truth, and together, they would take down the woman who had tried to destroy her. It didn't take long for Richard to take action. With the vial as evidence, he confronted Jessica, demanding that she explain herself. The confrontation was explosive. Jessica denied everything at first, but the evidence was irrefutable. Richard had seen the hidden poison with his own eyes. He had heard Olivia's story, and now he believed her. Jessica's facade cracked in an instant. She became defensive, frantic, but it was too late. Richard had already made up his mind. He ordered her to leave the mansion immediately, telling her that she had no place there anymore. The scandal spread quickly. Jessica, the perfect fiancée, the woman everyone thought Richard would marry, was revealed to be a manipulative liar. She had been poisoning Olivia all along, and now her reputation was in tatters. As Jessica was escorted out of the mansion, Olivia stood by Richard's side. She knew that this was just the beginning. Jessica's departure had freed Richard from the hold she had on him, but the damage was done. It would take time to rebuild their trust, but Olivia felt a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could finally breathe. Richard turned to Olivia, his face filled with gratitude. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through, he said, his voice sincere. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you. Olivia shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It's not your fault, Richard. You couldn't have known. Together, they stood in the aftermath of the storm that had torn through their lives. It wasn't the ending Olivia had expected, but it was the beginning of something new. A life without fear, without betrayal. A life where she could finally be herself, free from the chains of manipulation and lies. And in that moment, Olivia knew that she had won. She had survived. And now, her future was her own to shape. After Jessica's departure, the mansion felt different, lighter, almost. The tension that had clung to the air like smoke dissipated, leaving behind a space filled with possibility. But even as Olivia and Richard moved forward, the weight of the past still lingered. They had both been through so much. Olivia, with her years of hardship and betrayal, and Richard with his shattered trust and painful realizations. But as the days turned into weeks, something unexpected began to grow between them. A connection, a bond forged not just from gratitude, but from something deeper. something neither of them had anticipated. It was a rainy evening when it all started to change. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm that had raged inside Richard for so long. He had been quiet the past few days, withdrawn, still processing everything that had happened. But tonight, he couldn't keep it in any longer. Olivia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner when Richard entered, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an intensity she hadn't seen before. His eyes were focused, his jaw clenched with resolve. Olivia turned to greet him, but before she could speak, he interrupted. "Olivia," he said, his voice low but steady, "I need to talk to you." She paused, sensing the shift in the air. "What's wrong, Richard?" Richard took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about everything, about what's happened between us, about what Jessica did, and about how I've treated you." Olivia's heart began to race. She didn't know what to expect, but the sincerity in his voice made her stop everything she was doing. "I've been blind, Olivia, blind to what really matters," he continued. "I've spent so much of my life focused on the wrong things, on what others think, on keeping up appearances. But with you, everything has changed. You've shown me what it means to be real, to be honest, to love without expectations." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say, but Richard wasn't finished. "I've realized that I'm not the man I thought I was. And you, Olivia, you've been stronger than I could have ever imagined. You deserve so much more than what you've been given. You deserve to be loved, not because of what you do for others, but because of who you are." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so much time feeling worthless, trying to prove her worth to others, and now, here Richard was, telling her she was enough just as she was. "Richard," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling, but he didn't let her speak. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Olivia, I have no right to ask this, but I'm going to. I've already told you how I feel, and now I need you to know something else." Olivia stood frozen as Richard dropped to one knee in front of her, his eyes intense, but soft with vulnerability. In his hand was a small velvet box. For a moment, everything else seemed to blur away. "Olivia, I love you. I never expected to feel this way. But the moment I met you, everything changed. You've been through so much, and yet you've never stopped fighting. You've been strong when I wasn't. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the pain you've had to endure. Will you marry me?" Olivia's heart stopped. She couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, echoing in her ears. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. The woman who had been tossed aside, who had lived a life of pain and rejection, was now being asked to marry a billionaire. Her mind raced. Was this real? Was this just some fairy tale fantasy? She'd never dreamed of a life like this. And now, standing here with Richard on one knee, asking her to marry him, everything felt surreal. Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked down at him. "Richard, I don't know what to say." He smiled, his eyes full of hope. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I just need you to know that I want to be with you. I want to build a life together. I want to give you everything you've ever dreamed of." Olivia stood there, her heart torn. She had spent so long guarding herself from love, protecting herself from hurt. She had never believed she deserved happiness. But now, Richard was giving her a chance to rewrite her story. A story where she wasn't a servant, a victim, or a forgotten soul. "I never thought this was possible," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. "I never thought I could be happy. I didn't think I deserved it." Richard took her hand, gently pulling her down to sit beside him on the chair. "You deserve everything, Olivia. You deserve love, happiness, and a future filled with nothing but joy. You've been through hell, and now it's time for you to live the life you were meant to have." As Olivia looked at Richard, her heart swelled with emotions she didn't know how to express. He had shown her a side of love that was unconditional, that didn't come with strings attached. And for the first time in her life, she felt seen, truly seen. "I love you too," Olivia finally said, her voice filled with certainty she didn't know she had. "And I want this. I want a life with you." Richard's face lit up, and he gently slid the ring onto her finger. It was simple, elegant, a symbol of everything they had gone through together. Olivia looked at the ring, then back at Richard, and in that moment, everything felt right. "Then let's build that life together," Richard said, his voice full of promise. The proposal was just the beginning of a new chapter for both Olivia and Richard. They spent the following weeks planning their wedding, but more importantly, they spent time getting to know each other in ways they hadn't before. Olivia wasn't just Richard's fiancée. She was his equal, his partner in every way. And Richard wasn't just the man who saved her. He was her protector, her confidant, the one person who understood her like no one else ever had. They were no longer bound by the constraints of their pasts. Together they had created something new, a love built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding of the strength it took to get where they were. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. But it was theirs, and that was enough. Their wedding was small, intimate, and beautiful. There were no extravagant parties or lavish guests, just a simple ceremony surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Olivia walked down the aisle, not as the broken maid who had once been cast aside, but as the woman who had fought for a future, for love, and for herself. As she stood beside Richard exchanging vows, she realized something profound. She wasn't just marrying a billionaire. She was marrying a man who had seen her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. And that was worth more than anything money could buy. Together, they would face whatever came next, and whatever it was, they would face it together, hand in hand. For the first time in Olivia's life, she had found her place. Not in a laundry shop, not as a servant, but as a woman worthy of love and happiness, a woman who had earned every moment of joy she was now allowed to experience. And in that moment, Olivia knew that her life had truly begun. As the days following their intimate wedding celebration turned into weeks, Olivia and Richard settled into a new rhythm. The mansion, which had once felt like a cold, unfamiliar place, now felt like home. It was a place where they could both breathe, free from the shadows of the past. And yet, despite the happiness she had found, Olivia still couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking, just beneath the surface. Jessica's betrayal had left a scar on both of them. Richard, though he had forgiven himself, still carried the weight of being blind to Jessica's cruelty for so long. Olivia too struggled to let go of the fear that it could all slip away, that the life they had built could crumble as quickly as it had begun. But the biggest challenge came not from the past, but from Olivia's own heart. The first test came in the form of a letter. A thick, official-looking envelope arrived one chilly morning, its contents heavy with implications. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling as she carefully opened it. It was from her old employer, the laundry shop where she had spent years washing clothes for pennies, where she had lived a life of quiet desperation. The letter was an invitation. They were asking her to return. At first, Olivia thought it was a joke. But as she read the words, she realized it wasn't. The shop had been bought by a wealthy new owner, and they wanted her back. Not just as a maid, but as the manager. They were offering her a substantial salary, a chance to run the business she had once worked so hard for, and to finally break free from the shadows of the past. Her heart raced as she read the offer again. It seemed like the perfect solution. It was everything she had ever wanted. She could have a career, a future of her own. No longer would she be at the mercy of someone else. She could be independent. But as she sat there with the letter in her hands, a sense of unease gnawed at her. Was she really ready to go back to that life? Could she truly leave behind everything she had built with Richard? The life they had started, the love they had forged. Richard had always been supportive, but when Olivia showed him the letter that night, he couldn't hide the concern in his eyes. "Olivia, are you sure this is what you want?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with doubt. "This is your past. You don't have to go back to that." Olivia looked at him, her heart torn between two worlds. "I don't know, Richard. It feels like the right thing to do. I've been given a chance to start over, to take control of my life. This is a dream, isn't it? To finally be in charge of something, to prove that I'm more than just a maid?" Richard shook his head, his expression firm but filled with worry. "But you've already proven that, Olivia. You don't need to go back to that place. You have so much more now. A life with me, a future with endless possibilities. Don't let fear pull you back into a life that almost broke you." Olivia swallowed hard. "But what if this is my only chance to prove to myself that I can make it on my own? I've never had that freedom, Richard. I've always been dependent on others. I just want to know what it feels like to stand on my own 2 feet." Richard stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, I get it. I really do. But I don't want you to feel like you have to prove something to me or anyone else. You're already enough. You always have been. And if you're afraid that going back will make you feel whole, I can tell you that it won't. It's not worth it." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to do. I want this life with you, Richard. But I also feel like I've been running from my past, from the person I used to be. I don't know how to reconcile it all." The night was long, filled with silence and uncertainty. Olivia couldn't sleep. Her mind raced, torn between the life she had now and the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. She wandered through the mansion, looking out the window at the sprawling garden below, her heart heavy with indecision. She had always been afraid of letting go of the past, of losing the parts of herself that had shaped who she was. But now, as she stood there, looking at the life she had built with Richard, she realized something. She wasn't that woman anymore. The woman who had worked herself to the bone, the woman who had been discarded without a second thought, was no longer who she was. She had a new identity now. A new future. The next morning, Olivia made her decision. She sat down with Richard, the weight of her choice clear in her eyes. "Richard," she began, her voice steady, "I've thought about it, and I know what I need to do. I'm not going back to the laundry shop. I don't need to prove anything to myself. I've already proven that I'm more than I ever imagined I could be." Richard's face softened with relief. "Olivia, I'm so proud of you." She smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. "I don't need to run anymore. I've found my place. With you, this is where I belong." And so, with that decision, Olivia and Richard's journey together took on a new direction. They focused on building their future, not just as a couple, but as individuals, both strong in their own right, supporting each other along the way. For Olivia, the decision wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about embracing the future. And in that future, she wasn't just Richard's wife. She was her own person, with her own dreams, her own strength, and her own voice. The final test had been passed. Olivia had chosen her future, and with Richard by her side, she knew that there was no challenge she couldn't overcome. Together, they had created a new life, one built on love, trust, and the knowledge that they had both fought for what they wanted. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but Olivia had learned that with love and perseverance, she could handle anything that came her way. And for the first time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Olivia's journey had been anything but easy. From the harsh days spent in the cold corners of the laundry shop to the betrayal that nearly cost her life, she had fought every step of the way. But what no one, not even Olivia herself, had realized was that every hardship, every moment of pain, had been shaping her into something far stronger than she could have imagined. She had started as an orphan with nothing but a dream. A dream of a life that didn't consist of servitude, a life where she didn't have to fight for every scrap of respect she earned. But that dream seemed so far out of reach, especially when the people who should have cared for her were the ones who treated her the worst. She had learned to keep her head down, to take whatever was thrown her way and survive. But through all that survival, she had forgotten something crucial. She wasn't just meant to survive. She was meant to thrive. And thrive she did. The woman who had once feared even the smallest confrontation was now unrecognizable. The quiet, timid girl who had worked herself to the bone in the laundry shop had transformed into a strong, confident woman who had the courage to confront her past and the ability to embrace her future. Olivia wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a warrior. She had gone from being kicked out on the streets with nothing to becoming the woman who commanded respect, not through fear, but through her unwavering strength, grace, and integrity. She had found love, not because she needed it, but because she deserved it. She had found Richard, not as her savior, but as her partner, a man who saw her for the woman she truly was, not for her past mistakes. The woman who had once been afraid of her own worth was now standing tall, embracing her new identity. She wasn't the maid she had been in the laundry shop, cleaning others' clothes and folding her dreams into the background. No, she was now a queen, not because of the riches she had come to possess, but because she had learned to rule over her own life. The transformation wasn't about the title she now held as Richard's wife. It wasn't about the mansion, the wealth, or the luxury. It was about the strength she had forged through years of struggle. It was about taking the pieces of her broken past and turning them into a foundation for her future. She was no longer the woman who had been overlooked and underestimated. She was the woman who had conquered everything life had thrown at her. And through it all, there was Richard, the man who had seen the real Olivia from the start, the man who hadn't needed to rescue her because he saw her as his equal, his partner. Together, they had faced betrayal, heartache, and doubt, but they had emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. Richard had learned the true value of love, that it wasn't about power, wealth, or status. It was about respect, honesty, and the willingness to fight for each other. Their love story wasn't perfect, but it was real. They had built something beautiful, something that no one, not even the woman who had tried to tear them apart, could destroy. Olivia's journey from maid to queen was not a simple one. It was messy, painful, and filled with moments of doubt. But it was also beautiful, triumphant, and inspiring. She had found the strength to stand up for herself, to fight for the life she wanted, and to build a future full of love and possibility. Now, as she looked forward to the rest of her life, Olivia knew that no matter what came next, she could face it. She had been through the worst, and yet she had come out on the other side, stronger than ever. She was a queen, not because of the crown on her head, but because she had taken control of her own destiny, and no one, not even Jessica or anyone else who tried to break her, could ever take that away from her. Olivia was finally the woman she was always meant to be, and this was just the beginning of her reign. Did Olivia's transformation from maid to queen inspire you? Do you believe in the power of perseverance and love to change lives? Let us know how this story touched you. Please rate this video from 1 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any more incredible stories like this one. Your support means the world. and I can't wait to share more with you.